In South Carolina, in a small town called Greer, well, not really small, it was population 40,000, and it was said to be a very nice suburban town. It was full of nature and forest preserves, and also in the most recent years, it had a huge spike in people moving there. But then on October 13th, 2021 is when the Greer police station will receive a call from 68-year-old Bradley Post. He was telling the officers that morning his fiancée, 41-year-old Christina Parcell, had a job interview, and so he had called her just to ask her how the job interview was, but then he got no response. And so after a while of trying to contact her, he went over to her house that she lived in with her sister Tina and her 9-year-old daughter A. So he went to the house, and he said that when he walked in through the back door, it was very, very quiet in there. And when he started looking around the living room and the kitchen, he noticed that there was rose petals kind of flown all over the place, as well as rose stems. And it wasn't like a romantic trail or anything like that. It was kind of like very abrupt, as if someone had just thrown flower petals all over the place. So then he starts looking at all the rose petals, and he notices that there's a trail that leads down the hallway into the master bedroom. But then when he walks down and goes to the master bedroom is when he would discover 41-year-old Christina Parcell lying on the ground with blood all around her. And when he found Christina is when he immediately called the police.
I just walked in, I smelled some weird smell, and it looks like she's bled out on the floor.
Is she breathing?
No.
Okay, then we need to turn her over, make sure she's flat on her back, and we're going to start CPR, sir.
Okay, I think she's gone. It looks like there's brain matter everywhere. It looks like somebody might have shot in the back. She won't respond. She's got her eyes open.
Eyes are open.
There's a lot of blood.
So Christina Parcell was a 41-year-old woman from Greer, South Carolina that worked as a part-time vet tech, and she was seemingly loved by everyone that knew her. A lot of her coworkers at the veterinary hospital that she worked at would speak very highly of her, said that she was very fun and loving. Even some of her friends would call her Tinkerbell because she had a pixie haircut, and even the people that brought their animals into Christina said that Christina was a lover of animals and loved to just take care of them, and it seemed like she was kind of the perfect person for that job. And so that's what made this even more shocking as to who could have done this to a seemingly well-liked person. So getting more into the crime scene, when the police entered into the living room, they found a large puddle of blood right next to the couch, meaning that that is probably the place where Christina was first attacked at. They also found rose petals all over the home. There were rose petals like in the kitchen, in Christina's purse, on the floor, and then they also found blood drag marks from the living room all the way down the hallway and into the master bedroom. And in the master bedroom was 41-year-old Christina Parcell. She had 35 slash and stab wounds all over her body, as well as blunt force trauma to her head. And even when police were going down the hallway of the home, they ended up finding Christina's sunglasses lying on the floor, which could indicate a struggle.
You got to come home right now, emergency. I went to the door, no response, so the back door is always unlocked.
Okay.
So I walked around the back door. When I walked in, there was a smell, like a pesticide smell. And she's laying there on her back. It looks like there's either brain matter on the floor, or there's a lot of blood. It looks like she fell and was drugged.
So Bradley would go on to tell the police that Christina actually lived there with her 9-year-old daughter A and her sister Tina. And so Bradley had called Tina to tell her what just happened and also to ask her if there was any roses that was in the house before she left for work that morning, before Tina left for work that morning, or if she had any deliveries out to the house that were specifically roses, and Tina said no. And after Christina's death was announced, it was a big shock, and even the veterinary hospital that she worked at kind of wrote a memorial post on Facebook that said, quote, "It is with deep sadness and heavy hearts that we inform you of the death of our colleague and friend, Christina Parcell, who was taken from us on October 13th. We will all miss her more than words can express. She was not just our coworker, but our dear friend as well. We will share with you the details regarding a memorial fund in the days to come. Please keep Christina's family in your prayers. We also ask you to keep our Foothills family in your prayers during this difficult time." So Christina and her fiance, Bradley Post, had been together for about 5 years at this point, and even 6 months prior to the murder, in May of 2021, Bradley had proposed to Christina. And so, as it seemed on the surface that Christina was this very fun, loving person, behind the scenes, she was actually going through a very intense custody battle over her daughter, and her ex-boyfriend, 63-year-old John Mellows. And at the time of when John was told about Christina's murder, he wasn't in the States at all. He was actually in his home in Italy when he got the news. And so after he heard that, he immediately took the first plane down to South Carolina. And when the police started looking more intensely into the crime scene, what they ended up discovering were laptops, baggies of weed, a baggie of alleged cocaine, and a lot of paper document disputes talking about Christina's custody battle.
That is the bag that you picked up and identified?
It is.
Okay. In your first observations, you believed it to be a controlled substance?
Yes, sir. I had a previous assignment in narcotics for 14 years, and to me it appeared to be the way it was packaged and appeared to be a controlled substance.
Okay, so what occurred after you conducted a field test?
It did a presumptive test for cocaine with a field test.
After that field test was conducted, what did you do thereafter?
It was ultimately secured in the property and evidence section at the Greenville County Law Enforcement Center to be secured.
Here is the weight of the item and then the item. So my initialing is all over this bag.
Okay. Did you create a report that indicated your findings as to what that substance was?
I did.
And there was also this one time in particular, which I will go more in depth into later, but there was a time during John and Christina's custody battle where John had technically kidnapped and basically at the time John had like all week custody and then Christina had weekends. But then on Friday when John was supposed to return to Christina, he said, unfortunately, I don't think we can make it out there on time. I think we'll have to go on Saturday instead. But then John ended up never showing up. Christina and Tina did not know where A was until about 2 months later. They ended up seeing a picture of A on John's Facebook account with a sign in the background that was saying Revito, Italy. And so because of that, they found out that she was at his home in Italy, and that became an even more intense custody battle, with Christina now having to go through the government in Italy. When police started talking to neighbors as well, they started to collect some ring camera footage, and they actually had ring camera footage from a house right across the street, and they ended up getting the time frame of 9:15 a.m. to 11 a.m. And within that time frame, what they saw was a man dressed all in black kind of roaming around the house at around 9:15 a.m. and then he goes up to the door, and when he does, he knocks at the door. He stays there for about 10 seconds, and then all of a sudden you see the door open, and then the figure on the outside kind of pushes himself inside the home, and then the door slams behind him. And then what the police discover is that whoever this was inside the house for at least 30 minutes before the same exact person, all dressed in black, is seen riding on a bike down the street. And they actually caught 2 different angles of this. Now, in order to understand the crime itself, I feel like it's also very important for you to know Christina's relationship past, especially her relationship with John and her relationship with Bradley, because as I mentioned, Bradley was the one that discovered Christina, so the police were able to clear him pretty quickly. And at the time, John was all the way in Italy, and so he was also cleared pretty quickly. So if it wasn't John or Bradley, then who could have done this? So John and Christina actually met back in 2008 when Christina was 28 and John was 50. And John at the time was actually a pretty well-known music producer. He had worked on songs with the Rolling Stones, Elton John, and even went on tours with a couple of them. So he was constantly just on the road doing music. And prior to meeting Christina, he did get married and divorced twice. And he also owned his own bar in LA called the Doll Hut. And then in 2004 is when John decided to settle down in South Carolina, and then 4 years later in 2008 is when John met Christina. But John did have a pretty excessive record of domestic violence and harassment charges. There was this one incident in 2014 when John was basically applying to a job in South Carolina. Someone was looking for a music producer, so he applied for the job. But then when he didn't get the job, he started to then call the company, email them, text them, and then even post like threatening and harassing things about them. And then after that, they ended up pressing charges, but I don't think anything actually happened. I think he just had to pay a fee. And then in 2012, when John and Christina had been dating for about 4 years at this point, is when they brought their baby girl A into the world. But unfortunately, A was being born into a very toxic and abusive relationship. Christina and John were constantly on, and then they were off, and they were always fighting. And there was even this one time where they were about to officially break up back in 2016 when John was filing domestic abuse charges against Christina. But I don't think anything went far with that, because shortly after that they got back together. But then the time after that, when they broke up, that was like the official breakup, and they were not getting back together again, because literally the next day they started a custody battle over A, who was 4 years old at the time. So this custody battle ended up going on for years, and at one point John had sole custody, giving Christina visitation rights, but then John was trying to revoke those rights, claiming that the household that Christina lived in with A was not safe for A, mostly because of Christina's fiance, Bradley Post. Because ironically, in 2016, when John and Christina broke up, shortly after, that's when Christina met Bradley and the two began dating. And so from 2016 to 2020, Bradley had been with Christina throughout the entire custody battle. And then in 2020 is when John had technically kidnapped A and tried to keep her at his home in Italy for as long as he could, while Christina tried to gain visitation or some sort of sole custody. And Christina at this time also made a GoFundMe where she was trying to raise $15,000 to try to get her daughter A back to the States. And there was actually 2 instances where Christina went out to Italy to try to fight in court, trying to get A back into the States. And the first time Christina had went with her sister Tina, but nothing really happened. And then the second time in early of 2021 is when Christina went back to Italy. And then when she went to this court hearing is when the court had granted Christina sole custody of A. And then in May of 2021, A returned back to the States and in the care of Christina.
2020, that's the last we saw her. He missed visitation, which is, of course, a contempt. Said that they were out of the country, wouldn't be back in time, and wouldn't take phone calls. Missed the next visitation. So October of 2020, we basically figured out that he was in Italy. He had taken her to Italy. No communication from him. Christmas Day of 2020, so give or take 3 months, is the first time we got to talk to her. She was in Italy.
So John had another friend named Michael. Michael was kind of like John's assistant. He would do the cleaning, the landscaping, and just kind of help him out with any sort of music producer stuff. And so when Michael was talking to the police, that's when he mentioned that recently John has been getting close with a man, his friend named Zach Hughes. So a little bit of backstory on Zach quickly. He grew up in California, but then later moved to Virginia as an only child. But then when they lived in Virginia is when his parents actually adopted 5 children from Russia. And this was a very hard transition for Zach, because he was going from being an only child to now a child of 6 kids. And on top of that, he didn't really know any of his siblings that well. And his oldest sister, Grace, Zach would go on to say how abusive Grace was. There was this one time where Grace was a teenager where she had basically wrote out a very detailed note about how she wanted to murder her adoptive parents. And her parents ended up finding the note, so they contacted CPS, but again, nothing really happened after this. Zach would say that Grace was the type of person who was very manipulative, but she was also very smart, and she knew how other people operated, and so she was able to kind of control her emotions and use specific emotions as a way to manipulate people to like keep coming back to her. So since there was a lot of traumatic things going on in Zach's life at the time, he felt like the only place where he really found peace was at his piano. He would spend hours and hours at his piano. He even played piano at his school. He would go on to win awards. And then after high school, he would actually attend Juilliard, where he would continue his education in piano. But then after Juilliard, oddly, is when Zach tried to join the Marines, but only got halfway through until he had suffered stress fractures into both of his legs, and then he returned back to doing the piano full time.
This Beethoven idea that I had had a year and a half prior ended up coming together here in Greenville.
600 pages, 11 hours of music, all coming together for over a dozen free community concerts next year.
Rather than say, I'm only going to play this music if you pay me for it, that wasn't the spirit that this project was conceived in. It's something that I want to do regardless of whether I can make money at it. I would say it's the biggest goal of my life so far.
And how Zach and John first met was actually kind of by accident. During 2020, when everything was locked down, Zach couldn't really get a job anywhere during that time because he couldn't really go out anywhere. So what he decided to do was give back to his community. So he decided to learn and practice all symphonies of Beethoven, where he would play live music for people who were eating outside, kind of like dinner and a show. And so he was doing this during 2020, and during one of his shows is when John and his daughter A decided to go and listen to him play. And John, being a music producer, he really did have like a good ear for music. And so when he heard Zach play, he just thought it was so beautiful, to which after the song, he had went up to Zach to tell him how beautiful it was. And then that's when John introduced Zach to A, and then Zach asked A if she had any suggestions on what she wanted to hear. And she actually suggested Claire de Lune. So after this, Zach played the song for her, and then shortly after is when Zach and John started to become really good friends. Now, going back to John's friend Michael, when Michael was talking to the police, he tried to tell the police all these crazy lies, saying that Zach and John had known each other for years and they have been best friends for many, many years. But this would actually turn out to be false when they were looking at the text message conversations and phone calls between Zach and John.
It was Michael Manigault who kind of filled in some of the pieces about their relationship. He told us some information we later learned to be incorrect, saying that they had met at some restaurant downtown, that John and Zach had been friends for 4 or 5 years prior to this, and we later learned that that wasn't true as well.
It seems like they had a very fast friendship develop, but it wasn't a long one. They only hung out for a couple of months. Zach was enamored with the young child in a big brother kind of way.
And also another really big misconception about this case is a lot of people think that Christina and Zach had met before, but when the police looked into it, they found out that there was no connection between Christina and Zach.
There was no evidence to the fact that he had ever met her. The only connection between Zachary Hughes and Christina Parcell was John Melo.
We found no connection. I think he got a burner phone and sent her some harassing text messages at one point. But that was it. They were not acquaintances. They never hung out.
So now, given the backstory, as I said, when John was made aware of the news of Christina, he immediately got on the first plane to South Carolina. But immediately when John was let off the plane is when he was also immediately arrested for breaking his custody agreement. And so the police mostly just arrested him on those terms, thinking that if he did have something to do with Christina's murder, then at least they have him in custody and he can't actually go anywhere. Now, when the police were talking to Michael and Michael brought up the name Zach Hughes, it kind of rang a bell for the police a little bit, because they actually remember seeing Zach Hughes' name as an emergency contact when they arrested John. And since John was arrested immediately off the plane, he couldn't go and grab his luggages. And so he told the officers to write down the name Zach Hughes and gave Zach's phone number and said that only he was allowed to come and pick up his luggage. And as I mentioned, Zach and John had met in 2020 when Zach was performing all of those symphonies during COVID, and it was also around 2020 where currently Christina had sole custody over A. And so during this time is when John would slowly start to open up to Zach and talk about all of his struggles with Christina and how he doesn't have any proof of it, but he does believe that A is getting abused while in the care of Christina. He claims that something really, really scary is happening, but he doesn't understand or know exactly what it is. But before getting into the rest of today's video, I do want to give a big thank you to the sponsor of today's episode, Cash App. Now, I assume a lot of you guys have heard of Cash App before, but if you haven't, it is personally one of my favorite apps just because of how easy it is. I've been using Cash App for about a year. I feel like Cash App, compared to a lot of other services I've used, it seems like Cash App is just one of the safest ones out there, and it's also the most easiest. Like recently, I actually just used Cash App because I had landscaping landscaping done, and I paid the landscaper using Cash App as well. And that's just kind of like to show you how easy and convenient it is and how many people are actually using it. One of the coolest things about Cash App is that you can design your own debit card. You can pick from a bunch of different colors and patterns, add your favorite stamps, doodles, or even you and your friends' inside jokes and totally make it unique to you. You also get savings on stuff that you're already buying. Cash App customers can get exclusive discounts for things like coffee, boba, video games, and more. And if you're the type of person who loves concerts or exclusive drops, your Cash App card gets you early access to ticket sales or huge tours like Kendrick Lamar and SZA or Sabrina Carpenter. You also don't need to worry about any random monthly charges or a minimum balance requirement. It's a finance tool that works for you with awesome perks and a look that fits your vibe. Why settle for a boring card when you can make a unique one to you? Take control of your money today with Cash App, and if you're between 13 and 17, you can still sign up. You just have to ask a parent or guardian for help to open up a Cash App sponsored account. For limited time only, new Cash App customers can use our exclusive code to earn additional cash for real. If you're over 18, you just download Cash App, and after you sign up, use our exclusive referral code behind you in your profile, and you'll get $10 dropped right into your account, and when you send $5 or more to a friend within your first 14 days. Or if you're 13 to 17 years old, request a sponsored account from a parent or guardian, and once you sign up, use our exclusive referral code behind you in your profile to get $10 dropped right into your account when you order and activate your free Cash App card and send $5 or more to a friend within your first 14 days. Cash App is a financial services platform, not a bank. Banking services provided by Cash App's bank partner, prepaid debit cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC, direct deposit, roundups, overdraft coverage, and discounts provided by Cash App, a Block Incorporated brand. Visit cashapp.com/legal/podcast for full disclosures. So that is when Zach and John had basically teamed up a little bit to try to take custody away from Christina. So what they did was create a smear campaign. And basically when Christina was younger, she was a sex worker and she had displayed her services online. So Zach and John had taken screenshots of all of her photos of her profile and the names that she went by, and basically put all of those documents in separate yellow package folders and sent them out to random people. And so that was kind of like them creating a smear campaign to hopefully remove custody from Christina.
In a package to my office, it was all these old court documents between John and my sister where he accused her of being a prostitute. Anonymous packets also started showing up of naked pictures of her.
But Zach and John were not doing this for no reason, because yes, it is extremely harsh to do something like this, but it definitely was not without reason. And given everything that you know now currently about the case, you may or may not be thinking, maybe John and Zach are being a little bit harsh. Why are they going out of their way to try to take A out of Christina's care? I mean, literally John took A away from Christina and kept her in Italy for as long as he could until Christina had to go out to Italy just to get her back. And it seemed like on paper, Christina was loved by everyone. She was a vet tech and all of her coworkers loved her. All of the people that brought their pets into her loved her. So why would they be going this far out just to try to take A away from Christina? Now, I want you to keep this mindset that you have right now. Maybe it's a little bit confused. Maybe you're kind of not looking at Zach and John in that good of a light, but I want you to keep this mindset on purpose, because this is actually the exact mindset that the jurors had at the trial later on, because what I'm about to tell you is what the court had ordered specifically to not be mentioned at the trial. Again, the information that I'm about to tell you, hopefully you'll see how important and vital it really was and how it should have been included into the trial. So on the day of the murders, when Bradley had called the police, he was quickly questioned by the police. They didn't really keep keep him for that long just because of the situation that he went through. It was so traumatic. And so they basically just asked him about Christina's whereabouts the morning, the day before, asked him if he knew anybody who could have done this. And then after that, Bradley was just let go. But then the next day, on October 19th, 2021, is when Bradley went into the station again for further questioning, and they decided to collect Bradley's phone and look through it. You know, maybe Bradley and Christina had a conversation where Christina was talking about another man or something like that, and then they could use that as a lead. But when they looked into Bradley's phone, that's when it all became clear of what this abuse actually was. Police would end up finding over 50 videos of CP on his phone, including 10 folders, as if he was disgustingly putting his CP into genres. There were pictures and videos on his phone, and the most disturbing and sad part about it is that a lot of these videos and pictures included not just but her mother, 41-year-old Christina Parcell, also in these photos and videos.
Asked if he would allow us to do a forensic download of his phone, and he agreed to it. We discovered some content on his phone that resulted in Mr. Post receiving some criminal charges.
Police had seized child images and videos from devices that belong to Brad Post.
Bradley Post is arrested and charged with several counts of sexual exploitation of a minor, buggery, and criminal sexual conduct with a minor.
On review of Brad Post's devices, Christina Parcell is in images and some videos.
Allegations started to trickle out about Christina and her possible involvement in the child sex abuse material that her fiance, Bradley Post, had been arrested on just 1 week after her murder. And when that hit the news, it flipped this case upside down. And I've never covered a murder case where the victim very quickly becomes the biggest villain in this story. But after these allegations were made public, that's exactly what happened to Christina Parcell.
So then the next day, on October 20th, Bradley was arrested for 7 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor, sexual conduct with a minor, meaning that possibly in these pictures and videos, Bradley was himself also involved, as well as buggery. And on that same day, John Melo was also arrested for breaching custody terms, but after finding out what they just found out on Bradley's phone, John was dismissed and released. But when John was arrested, police did go through John's phone just to try to find any sort of evidence. And what they ended up finding was over 1,700 text messages on WhatsApp between John and Zach. Some of these messages included John giving Christina's number to Zach, telling him to text her off of a burner phone and try to harass her or scare her. Now, something that's a little bit different about WhatsApp compared to a lot of other messaging services out there, I'm not really sure what it is in the app specifically, but if you were to, example, download messages that came through on iMessage, if you were to do that and download it, they would all come out in chronological order. But when you do that to WhatsApp or any sort of third-party text message platforms, they don't necessarily come out in chronological order. They come out kind of all scrambled. And so the police then have to try to go through each message based on the time frame and try to figure out what message went where. And we're talking 1,700 text messages. That's like a puzzle with 1,700 pieces. But from these messages, it kind of seemed like Zach and John were purposely speaking in code, because there was some messages that read, quote, "I'm riding bike my way that," meaning to say, I'm riding my bike that way. And another text message that said, quote, "B won't camera on truck," meaning truck won't be on camera. Now, these messages were actually in late May, 5 months before the murder, so it's suspected that those messages took place during their smear campaign. And it was also made known that John and Zach also spoke to each other on the day of the crime, to which these text messages would also be revealed at the trial.
This is from John Melo to Zachary Hughes. Burden if way, but life, like family, finally, beg down case and lawyer love, more doomed, been a count think. than not listening is totally nothing. Her it matter as I 14 November at Woods so leave has me stake you to point let have all even taking our due close stay we she and us right of hate control brother no needs was this can very far your for come say with on thee. I don't know what it says. I know it's talking about a burden. I know that it mentions a lawyer. I know it mentions.
And then what time does Zach respond?
Zach Hughes responds at 11:36 a.m. on October 13th, 2021 with LOL.
Police would also uncover a phone call that was made on the day of the crime at 1:21 p.m., lasted for about 20 minutes, and then there was another call at 2:22 p.m. that lasted an hour and 30 minutes.
121 to 141.
And then what about number 17?
Change of landscape at 121.
And again, number 18?
You have another orientation landscape at 141.
And let's go back up to the top of this report. What time in number 19?
19 again, a speaker activation at 1:48 p.m.
I'll skip to what about number 22?
22, you have a speaker activation at 2:22 p.m.
Okay. And what's the end time on that?
3:50.
Now, although we don't know who Zach was making those first calls to, they did uncover that the night before the murder, John had made a call to Zach for an hour and 53 minutes, including smaller little calls throughout the night. And then on the day of the crime, they spoke again at 3:50 p.m., and that call lasted 2 hours and 20 minutes.
John Melo's WhatsApp account, it took place on 10/13/2021 at 3:50 p.m. and it was an hour and 20 minutes.
So that's on October 13th, 2021 at 3:50 in the afternoon.
Correct.
For a duration of an hour and 20 minutes?
Correct. Call received from John Melo on 10/12/2021 at 7:01 p.m. Duration is an hour and 53 minutes.
All right, so that first number up here, whose number is that?
That would be the number of for John Melo's account.
And then what is this number right here?
That would be the number associated with Zach Hughes' WhatsApp.
And that is using WhatsApp?
Mm-hmm.
Can you make phone calls through WhatsApp?
You can.
And when they looked into Zach's truck, they ended up finding Zach's truck the day after the murders on surveillance footage. And in the trunk of his truck, they found the bike, the black bike, that looked very, very similar to the bike seen on the Ring camera. And not just that, but during Christina's autopsy, they found DNA underneath Christina's fingernails. And when that DNA was tested, it came up to be Zach Hughes's DNA. And so with that, the police went over and arrested Zach. At the time of Zach's arrest, he was actually living with a family from church, and it was said that when the police showed up, Zach didn't fight or yell or anything. He just simply walked out of the house with his hands up as if he was kind of expecting this. And then as police started to look around the property a little bit, that's when they went into the garage of the home. And so they walk into the garage and they see about 3 bikes, all kind of have like spider webs and dust on them. They look like they haven't been used in a super long time. And then off to the side of the garage was a brand new black bike that looked either brand new or freshly clean because it didn't have any spider webs on it. There was no dust on it. And ironically, this bike looked very similar to the one that was seen in Zach Hughes's truck and the one that was seen on the Ring camera footage.
The black bike that I mentioned earlier that was sitting upside down and was just very, very clean.
When you say very, very clean, what do you mean?
So compared to everything else in this garage, it's just a dirty, dusty garage. Things sit there and collect dust and dirt. And this bike looked like it just rolled off the showroom floor.
Now, when Zach was first arrested, I'm not really sure why. And then after, when he was released, Zach actually bought a ticket to play piano on a 3-month cruise in Michigan. So he was about to go to Michigan until for some reason he decided not to. And he instead decided to turn himself in and over to the police. And so when he did that, that's when he was arrested. And that's when Zach was charged with murder, burglary, possession of a weapon during a violent crime, and harassment. But before Zach's trial, however, is when John was also arrested for harassment and conspiracy associated to a smear campaign. And then in 2022 is when 2 lawsuits were filed. One was by a friend of A, so it was a family friend, and then the second one was actually from A herself. And before talking about the lawsuits, I do want to give a quick warning. The contents in this lawsuit can be very descriptive, and it also has to do with child exploitation and child abuse. So if that's something that you are very sensitive to, I would recommend skipping. It is very hard to read. This lawsuit came in from A's friend, and it reads, quote, Jane Doe was a friend of Parcell's minor daughter. Jane Doe spent a lot of time with Parcell's minor daughter while under the supervision and in the care of Parcell. During that time that Jane Doe spent with Parcell and her minor daughter, Parcell and Bradley Post, took pictures/videos of and with Jane Doe in states of undress and in sexually provocative positions. The plaintiff is informed and believes that during the investigation of the murder of Parcell, a search of Post's cell phone revealed the contents of inappropriate and sexually explicit nude pictures of Jane Doe taken with and in the presence of Parcell. Upon information and belief during the course of the law enforcement investigation of Christina Parcell's murder, law enforcement discovered numerous photographs and videos of various minor children, including minor Jane Doe, in various stages of undress and in sexually explicit and nude positions, which had been taken over the course of several years. Upon information and belief, the videos and photographs of Jane Doe graphically depict her privates and breasts. Further, petitioner is informed and believes that the photographs and videos of Jane Doe were taken by, with, and or in the presence of defendant Post and defendant Parcell. And there was also a second lawsuit that was made by A herself, and this lawsuit was actually towards Christina's sister Tina, claiming that there was one occasion where A had gotten out of the shower, and when she did, Tina came in the bathroom and just took a picture of her and ran off. And it's so heartbreaking because I feel like this story just gets so much darker the more you learn about it. And in this year, actually, on February 10th of 2025 is when Zach Hughes' trial began. And at first, Zach Hughes did plead not guilty, but the prosecution said that any reference to CP would be excluded from the case. And so that meant there had to be no mention of CP, no mention of sexual abuse, or anything that related to that. Anything that related to that would be redacted and striked. And I just think this is so crazy because given the information you now know from what I said earlier, remember the mindset that you're in right now, and that was the mindset that the jurors were in currently. They were confused. They had all these questions of like, well, why would they do this? What's the underlying reason? And so now that you know the information and know the actual motive of this murder, about what they did and how they knew that A was actually getting abused, and there was so many things that were going on with A that John and Zach just couldn't do. Zach would even explain at his trial later on that he even tried to call the police multiple times about this as well.
She's a really special kid. She was definitely mature beyond her years, like I talked about. She could hold a conversation with adults. She looked you in the eye. John had been telling me for weeks, Zach, Christina's killing my little girl. Like, I can see the spark dying in her eyes. And again, when I first heard that, I thought, aren't you being a little dramatic? Like, I hadn't seen her, but it just seemed a bit much. When I saw her in these visits, I didn't feel that way anymore. She was not the same little girl that I had known in Greenville when I first met them. She had put on a great deal of weight, probably about 20 pounds, which is roughly a quarter of her body weight. For an 8-year-old girl, that's a lot in a short period of time, but it was much more than that. It was her demeanor. Her spirit was just, she was morose, she was depressed. Like that spunky, precocious, lively little girl that I had met was just not present there.
Now, Zach at his trial did confess to the murder of Christina. I'm assuming he just pled not guilty because he wanted a chance to actually be on trial and explain his side of the story. But at the trial, he did confess to murdering Christina Parcell. And he also said that at first, John had offered him $5,000 and then $10,000 to sort of be a hitman and kill Christina for him. But Zach said that he declined both offers because he said that it wasn't about getting money. He said that he did it because he feared A's safety and said that he'd rather go to jail than stand by and let A grow up into the life that she was forced into by Christina and Bradley.
May of 2021, what, if anything, did John ask you to do for him?
John asked me that if I believed his daughter was in grave danger, would I be willing to kill Christina Parcell for $5,000? I was shocked and insulted by the request, and I gave him an immediate and unequivocal no. Maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, he asked me again if I became convinced that his daughter was in danger, would I be willing to kill Christina Parcell for $10,000? I told him the only way I would ever consider taking action like this is if I was absolutely convinced that his daughter was not only in danger, but that the only way to rescue her from that danger would be to take Christina Parcell's life.
And again, Zach had tried to call the police numerous times. He would call, he would make complaints. There was even times where he would go into the station and actually fill out multiple reports, but no matter what he did, the police did nothing about it. Zach had even tried to call CPS multiple times. He even tried to call into the police station anonymously, kind of reporting sounds of abuse coming from inside the house, but the police never showed up. There was also one time where Zach was posing as a neighbor from Christina, saying, oh, my next door neighbor, I keep hearing all of these noises and I keep seeing all these weird things. But again, the police never showed up to the house. Before getting into the rest of today's case, I'd like to give a big thank you to the sponsor of today's episode, Shopify. When I started a podcast, it seemed like I kind of had to figure it out all on my own when it came to scripts, setup, filming schedule, logos. It was also super overwhelming, and every day seemed like an introduction to a new decision that needed an answer. And when you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. And for millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the e-commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Petal and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out, like having a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are strolling or scrolling. Best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, then you're ready for Shopify. Shopify. Turn your business idea into cash with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial starting today at shopify.com/behind. Go to shopify.com/behind. That's shopify.com/behind to get started today. Now, even though at this point Bradley was still in jail awaiting his trial, he actually did make an appearance at Bradley's trial to talk about the moments leading up to when he discovered Christina.
Christina Parcell had a job interview. Typically, when she had something critical, I would call and try to make sure she was up. She was. And then when she was driving to the interview, she called me and we talked for a while. And then she was a couple minutes from her interview, and so she hung up.
As far as you know, did she go to that interview?
Yes. No, she didn't answer.
So then what did you do?
I walked around the back door because frequently they'd leave the back door unlocked, and I walked into the back door.
This jury just saw the body camera of Chris Robinson. Did you see him go in the house?
See who?
Deputy Chris Robinson, the officer who you spoke to, the first person you spoke to on scene.
I may have, but I don't recall who he was.
I'm going to ask you, have you ever met Zachary Hughes?
No.
Have you ever talked to Zachary Hughes?
No.
Have you ever corresponded him with, in any way, shape, or form, through email, social media, or the like?
No.
When was the first time you knew who Zachary Hughes was?
When my attorney set a meeting to come see me, and he showed me a picture and said this person was arrested for the murder.
For the murder of Christina Parcell?
That's correct.
Zach would go on to say that on October 13th, he arrived to Christina's home in the early morning hours. He said that he was down the street kind of watching the home and seeing anybody go in and out of it. He said that he waited until Bradley went to work, till A went to school, and until Tina went to work as well. But Christina, of course, wasn't at work that morning because she had a job interview to go to. So she went to the job interview, and then when she got back at around 9 a.m. is when Zach continued to watch the house before actually going into the house at 9:15 a.m. And he knew this because it was shown through Zach's phone history that his phone was pinging in that area multiple days leading up to the crime, as if he was learning their routines and trying to figure out a time that A and Tina wouldn't be there and he'd be able to commit the murder of Christina.
Some specific activations showing the device near the Tyndall Avenue, specifically between 10:47 a.m. and 12:01 p.m. And then there's two others, one to the south and one to the north. Next one. This is October 12th, 2021, between 12:31 and 1:21 p.m. The first one, 12:31 to 1:07 p.m. is consistent with being in the area of Tyndall Avenue. And then the second one at 1:18 to 1:21 is consistent with being at 12 Blake Street in Greenville.
Zach said that he approached the home with a big bouquet of flowers and a small gift box. He knocked on the door and said that he had a delivery for Tina Parcell. So Christina opened up the door, and when she said that Tina wasn't home is when Zach had rushed his way inside. At this point, Christina started trying to attack him and try to hit him back, but then that's when Zach had hit her over the head with a heavy weapon and then pulled out his knife and began to stab and slash Christina 35 times. He would then drag Christina's body from the living room over to the master bedroom. And as for the rose petals all over, Zach just kind of claims that since he was holding this big bouquet of rose petals, the rose petals that were found at the scene were basically just rose petals that were getting thrown around in all of the commotion. They weren't purposefully placed. And even when you look at the crime scene photos, they don't really look purposefully placed, in my opinion, as well.
Christina Parcell's life on October the 13th.
Yes, because I believed it was absolutely necessary to save her. And I was right.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. I mean, I had a great life. I had everything. I made money doing what I loved. I was going to be going to the South Pacific to play concerts for rich people on cruise ships. I mean, But how could I go and enjoy that and know that I was leaving a kid to her fate, a kid who thought that I was her friend? I would never have been able to look at myself in the mirror again if I had done that. I brought a knife, and I brought a box that was made to look like a gift wrapped box, and a bunch of roses that I had bought the day before. I knew that the only way I was going to be saved from what she was enduring was for me to take this route. I made that up. That's not true. But I said it because I wanted to give an opportunity to have FaceTime in person with an agent from DSS away from her mother, where she could tell them that her mother was sexually abusing her.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. You are to disregard.
Now, as I mentioned, the prosecution said that they didn't want to have any mention of CP or child trafficking, but Zach spoke about it anyways because obviously it's a very, very big part of the case. It felt like it was important for the jury to know. And even though every time he said it, the judge always said strike that or redact that, but even though they were striking it from the transcript, does not mean you could just strike that from the jury's mind. Like, once it's already said, they're already thinking about it. It's kind of too late at that point. And even when Zach says it for the very first time, you can hear the jury in the background audibly gasp as if a ball had just been dropped. And again, even the prosecution gets angry with Zach, and even the judge himself gets angry at Zach for even bringing it up.
The prosecution said that Zach was mad. They said he had an angry heart, that he wanted to inject himself into this custody dispute, but that's not why it happened. The why to the homicide is very important because it gives insight into the person's heart. In this case, you were going to hear that the why was not jealousy or greed or a crime of passion. This was not done for money or any other personal gain or benefit, not to help out any kind of friend. This was done for a just cause. And that's not malice, and that's not murder.
He started to tell me about really grave concerns he had about his daughter, specifically when his daughter was with her mother. He just didn't trust her, and he thought that she wasn't responsible and that she might even hurt her at some point. It was clear that he just was terrified about the danger his daughter was in.
And because Zach was mentioning CP so often, the judge actually gave him an additional 6 months in jail just because he kept on bringing it up and he wasn't supposed to. And also, Tina, Christina's sister, also came to the stand to talk about her relationship with Christina, to which she would say that at first her and Christina didn't really have a close sister friendship until that's when their mom was diagnosed with cancer. And so when their mom was diagnosed with cancer, that's when she said that her and Christina started to become very close. She started to learn about all of the things going on in Christina's life, her custody battle, and then eventually Tina at the time lived in an apartment, and she thought, why don't you and A just come and live with me for a while and then we can all just be together. So Christina and her daughter A moved in with Tina, and then shortly after, in early 2021, is when they moved into the house. There was also an opportunity for A herself to come to the stand, to which the court had declined this opportunity. They said that they didn't want A on the stand, which is understandable. I mean, she's only 9 years old, and so having to recount all of these traumatic events in front of a group full of strangers or a room full of strangers is very hard to do, especially when you're just such a young child. And so, in my opinion, I think they might wait for A's testimony until Bradley post-trial, but again, we'll talk a little bit about that later. At the trial, there was also a photo of Zach that was released because in the woods surrounding Zach's home, they ended up finding trail cameras, and so on those trail cameras, they were able to catch Zach at 10 a.m. 2 days before the murder wearing a black hoodie, and this hoodie looked very similar to the hoodie that was found in the Ring camera footage.
The outside is black. We had the individual in the bicycle riding away on a black hoodie, but you can also tell the top being folded out, the inside is a grayish color The person who entered her house was wearing a gray jacket.
And it was also at the trial where Zach would open up about his older sister, Grace. He was saying how Christina reminded him a lot of his older sister, Grace. He said that as him and John started to get even closer, this was way before Zach had even told John about Grace, but it felt like everything that he mentioned about Christina, about how she was so loving and fun to everyone else around her, but then when it came behind closed doors, it was like meeting a completely different person. John would tell Zach how manipulative Christina was. She was able to use her charm and her personality as a way to just maneuver her way over people. She was the type of person that didn't really like to be told no and would often try to fight her way out of things. And she also had this way of people that made her very likable, to where she was able to create this persona that she could show people, and it was a persona that people really loved, but behind closed doors, to the people that she loved, she would completely become a different person. And the reason why she would do that is so that this person, if they were to go out and try to say, well, Christina did this, no one would believe them. And again, when Zach was hearing all of this from John, it exactly reminded him of his older sister, Grace. And so he would talk about that at the trial as well.
Point by point, everything he described about Christina Parcell was exactly the same as my sister, Grace. He told me that Christina Parcell was a master manipulator. He said she can lie at the drop of the hat and you'll never know it. He said she was incredibly charming. He said she was incredibly intelligent and talented. He used to say she was smarter than he was, but that her biggest fault was that she was lazy. And she had this arrogance combined with her laziness that was essentially born out of the fact that she knew she never really had to work too hard at anything in life. And she could even sacrifice trust with people and tell them lies that could easily be found out, because ultimately she was completely confident in her ability to reel someone back in.
Ever told him about Grace? Did he know anything about Grace?
No. I don't make a habit of talking about Grace to people. One, it's incredibly difficult to speak about, and two, most people, having not met someone like that, it just doesn't really land most of the time. They don't understand what you're talking about. So no, John had no idea that I'd had this experience with Grace, unless they find someone who might be useful to them, and then they create a duplicate of themselves that they can control. And this is exactly what Grace would do. So when John was telling me all this, I realized that there was an incredible danger that what Christina Parcell was a future preview of what Aida Melo could potentially become if she was left in this woman's custody and was raised by her. And the facts have borne out that I was right. But
Sustaining.
And then after this is when the court ended up finding Zach guilty for the murder of Christina Parcell, possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime, and was given life in prison. And even though Zach was already charged and put into prison, now that just left John. So John, as I said, was released for breaching his custody terms, but if you noticed in Zach's trial, he had mentioned how John had offered him $5,000 to $10,000 to be a hitman to murder Christina. So then shortly after Zach's trial is when John was arrested. And so John was then arrested for accessory before the fact to a felony and solicitation to commit a felony, and is currently in emergency protective care. And for those who don't know what emergency protective care is, it's basically like prison, but it's a fancier prison. It's kind of where like all of the rich people tend to go. Like if you ever hear rich people in the media go into prison, most of the time they're always going there. A lot of people who commit nonviolent crimes like tax fraud or IT, something like that, and that is currently where John is. And as for Bradley as well, even to this day, he is still in jail awaiting trial. But yeah, that is the end of today's case. I hope you guys found this case interesting. And if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I would love to hear all of your guys' comments about the case down below. It's very rare that you find a case where the victim is put in such an evil spotlight after the fact. And I mean, given everything Christina has done, she is an evil person. And there has been a lot of discourse about this case as well. A lot of people say that Zach murdering Christina was a little bit too harsh, that he shouldn't have done that. But at the same time, he did try to go to CPS. He did try to contact the police. He was trying to do everything that the police probably would have told him to do in a situation like this. But even though he was doing all of those things, nothing was happening and the abuse was still occurring. And Zach said in the trial that he didn't want A to grow up in a household like that. He even said that he saw Christina as a future representation of what A would become, and he felt very sick to his stomach at that thought. And so again, that is where the discourse lies. A lot of people also feel like Zach shouldn't have gotten life in prison as well, claiming that that sentence was a little bit too harsh. But again, I would love to hear what you guys think about it in the comments below. And yeah, that is all from me. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Make sure to be safe out there. And as always, I love you, I love you, I love you. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.